Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don Pizzetta.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, and thank you for watching IT Pro TV, helping you level up with IT learning everywhere you go. I'm your host, Zach Memis, for this episode of CompTIA Linux Plus. Scheduling Tasks Part 2. Thank you for joining us. And once again, Don Pizzetta is here to show us the way. Don, good to see you, sir, as usual.
Glad to be back, Zach. And yep, in the last episode, I rambled on a bit too long
You
about
did, but it was a good ramble.
and cron.
It was good.
And so this episode, we're going to continue on looking at some other features of cron, how we can work with it, and a few different scenarios that you might encounter out in the real world where you need to adjust that behavior a little bit. So we're following on with part 1 and continuing with our scheduling or procrastination adventure, depending on how you want to look at it.
So we ended with how do we schedule a task for an individual user?
Right.
Yeah.
So
how
we
do
were,
we?
so we were looking at the cron configuration files, but they were the global files, the one for the system. So let me go back and just pull that up to recap real quick. If we take a look at /etc/cron tab, right? That's the cron table, or the table of scheduled jobs, and we didn't have any. And then I showed the /etc/cron.d folder, where we had a couple of bash scripts, basically, that were in there set to run at particular intervals, right? These are great. These are cron, but it's running globally for the entire system. If I want a task to be executed for a single user, I've got some choices here. Okay, one, I could have the user reach out to an admin, or if they were an admin themselves, they could do this, and they could edit the cron tab file and add the task in with the username of that individual user to execute on their behalf, right? But only an administrator can do that. You can't do that as a regular user. But if regular users want to, they can actually manage their own cron jobs, right? They can create cron jobs, and it doesn't modify these files. You can actually have a cron tab file in your home directory. Now, the odds are you probably don't have one. So I'm going to get into my home directory. I'm in /home/dpizzette. And if I do a ls-a, I can see I've got all sorts of stuff in here. I don't see anything that's .cron, okay? So it doesn't look like I have a cron file. Now, some distros will store it here. Others will actually store it in the /var/spool folder because it'll be a scheduled thing. If we were to go and browse to /var/spool, you may find a cron folder in there, and I can see I've got one. And if we go into that cron folder, whoops, I'm going to switch to root. This, you have to be an administrator to get into these folders. So I'm going to go in here and get into that cron folder and just take a look, and it looks like it is empty. Okay, so I don't have anything there either. So right now, users don't have, none of the users on my system have any individualized cron table set up. Now, I had to switch over to root for a moment there because this is all protected. If a regular user was able to write to these folders, what they could do is, like, I could create cron jobs and stick them in Zach's account. And now they run under Zach's permission. So somebody could potentially elevate their privileges in a way that's not appropriate or gain access to files they wouldn't normally have access to. So that's why this is all kind of protected under lock and key. End users are not allowed to edit these files. If they want to edit them, I'm just going to exit back to my regular user. So I'm back to my regular user. They have to use a special command. And that command is the cron tab command. So cron tab is a file /etc/cron tab, right? That's that global cron table. But cron tab is also a command. And the command lets users edit their individual cron table. So as dpizzette, if I want to schedule something, I can come in and just do cron tab -e. -e means edit. I want to edit my table. I can do cron tab -l to list my table. If I want to see what jobs do I have. So when I run cron tab -l, I get no cron tab for dpizzette. I don't have one. I don't have anything scheduled. If I run cron tab -e, I get my default text editor. Okay, now this might be Vim, like it is in my case, or it might be Nano if you're on Ubuntu, so it might look a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's just whatever your default text editor is. And that's it, it's just an empty file. Well, now you can start to schedule jobs. So if we remember the format from the last episode, we can come in and specify things. We have to have our 5 time intervals, right? So my first one would be on, if I wanted to run something on a particular minute, right? I want to run something at 10 p.m. And so I'm going to put 0 for the minutes. And then for the hour, I want it to be 10 p.m. And so that would be 22 in the 24-hour clock, right? And then we follow that up by the month. What months do I want to run this on? And I'm going to do the star. Actually, I think I might have that backwards because we have to do the day by name and the day by number as well. Well, in my case, I want this to run at 10 p.m. on Friday. So I would need to figure out what the value was for Friday as the day of the week. And so in my case, that would actually be day of the week is the 5th value. So I'm going to cheat and look at my notes real quick. So the third one is actually the day of the month. And so I'm saying I don't really care what the day of the month is. The 4th one is the month of the year, and I don't really care about what the month of the year is. And then the 5th one is the day of the week. I want this to run on Friday, and this is on a 0 through 6, where 0 is Sunday, 6 is Saturday. So in my case, Friday would be 5. So I'm going to put a 5 there. All right. So 0, 22, star, star, 5. That's every Friday at 10 p.m. Then I need to specify the user that it's going to execute as. Well, it's me, right? So I'll just put in dpz. And then I tell it the command that I want it to execute as. Now, I can specify a script if my shell environment has, where bash is able to be found and it can execute. So I could just say, I want to run /backup.sh. Or if we want to be on the safe side, we can do the full execution here and say, I want to run /user/bin/bash. And then I want to point it at /home/dpz/backup.sh. That's the command that I want to execute. All right. Now, once you've typed all this stuff in, and you can add more than one line. If I want to schedule 10 different jobs, I can come in and add 10 different lines, 10 different times, 10 different commands. And when it's all done, we can save it. And the cron tab file actually does some basic syntax validation. So it'll look to see if you've got some errors in there that don't make sense. They have to be pretty glaring errors, though, for it to trip up. I find that it ignores a lot of things. Little typos a lot of times won't get caught. So it's really kind of checking the times. But now that that's put in place, I've created a cron job just for me that's going to run as my user account. And if I do cron tab -L, I can pull up that list, and there's the command that's going to be executed. And I can see, the time and interval and so on. And it's being run as me. Now, where did that get stored? If I take a look at my home directory, let me just do a ls-l, LA, so we can see everything that's in there. Some distros will actually create a cron tab right in your home directory. And so you might find a .cron tab file or a .cron. In my case, I don't have it. It's going to be in the spool folder. So let me switch back over to a root login. And if I go back into /var/spool/cron and take a look in there, now there's a dpz folder. That wasn't there before. And that lets me know that this particular user has scheduled a job. And if we go into that dpz folder, oh, sorry, not a folder, it's a file. If we take a look in that file, we'll see the cron tab. So if I cat that file, there it is, and I see the job. Now, because I'm logged in as root, I could go in and I could edit that. I could change the jobs that Don has scheduled. Or I could help create a job. So if Zach calls me up one day and says, hey, I need to have this particular task run on a Tuesday. Well, I'm an administrator, so I could come right in here and create that file. You just call it Zach or whatever his username is and put commands in there. Or if you take a look at the man page for the cron tab command, you'll see where you can actually specify the username right there. So as an administrator, I don't have to remember /var/spool or whatever. I can just say, all right, there's a Zach user, so I'm going to do cron tab -e-u Zach. So now I'm going to edit the cron table for the user Zach, and it's going to create jobs that he'll be able to see and manage. He'll be able to do cron tab -L and see them. Or if he's just not a sophisticated user, doesn't want to mess with that, he can just ignore it, and that job is going to run. So this is how we manage jobs for individuals. I could just as well go put them in the global cron tab, /etc/cron tab or /etc/cron.d. But if I put them there, the users won't see them, and the users won't have control over them. So administrators will always have to be involved. The nice part about using the cron tab command is the users can do it themselves. They don't have to call the help desk. They can just do cron tab -e. They're editing their own table, and those commands will run under their user privileges. So any task they have permission to do, their cron tab will be able to execute as well. So not too hard of a thing to do, but it does allow us to give that power over to the users.
But what happens if our computer's shut down when a task should run?
So good point. Right now, we're talking about users on a server. If I'm doing this on a system that's providing a service, it's going to be running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It should never be off, right? But on a workstation, we're talking about end users here. So end users are usually going to run things on a workstation. Workstations, especially laptops, they get turned off a lot, right? You turn it off, you take it home, you fire it back up, or even desktops, they go to sleep. They go into power save mode or whatever, right? If I have a cron job that's scheduled to fire off at 10 p.m., exactly at 10 p.m., all right, and my computer's asleep at 10 p.m., if I wake it up at 10:05, it's already passed. It's passed, and it doesn't run the job. It won't run the job until the next day at 10 p.m. or the next Friday at 10 p.m. or whatever. So if your system is not running when the time interval hits, the command gets skipped. All right. Now, that might be okay if it's something that you're expecting. The system was off anyway. There had to be some reason there, and so you're okay with it not running. But if it is something that's important to you, then you might want to make it up. Right? Now, the reason it defaults this way is imagine I'm running a backup and I've got a 6-hour window for that backup to run. It's got to run between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. in order not to impact my customers, right? Well, if 11 p.m. rolls around and the system's not running, so the task doesn't run, and the system comes on at midnight, now there's only 5 hours left in the window. And if the backup takes too long, it'll impact my users. So I would rather skip the backup and just run it again the next night. Right? And so that's the default behavior, is it'll just run on the next time that interval hits. But if it's something critical and you don't want it to get skipped, right? Maybe you've got legal compliance. You've got to have a backup of your logs every 24 hours. You can't go 48 hours or once an hour, whatever it is. You can actually set it so that it'll run skipped jobs. Now, cron itself won't do it. There's actually an additional service that we sort of saw in the last episode called Anacron. All right. Now, I mentioned in the last episode that cron and at are in pretty much every distro that I've touched. Anacron is not. It's in a lot of them. It's actually in CentOS. It's in this one already because we saw it in the last episode. But there are many distros that don't ship Anacron by default. So you might have to install it, right? It's just a package. So typically really easy to get installed. You would, whoops, let me get out of this. So you would just do something like sudo yum install Anacron. Anacron, Anacron, like that. Or if you're on Debian or Ubuntu, it would be sudo apt install Anacron. And then that's going to reach out and get it. Again, odds are you've already got it. If I run it, it tells me I've already got it installed and it's the latest version. It does have another nickname, which is Crony, which, it's supposed to be like the assistant for cron. So it's called the Crony.
Oh, yeah.
But the official service is actually called Anacron. And this one is the same as cron, except if you miss a task, if your system is off, when it fires back up the next time, it'll run any missed tasks. And that's super handy for things like laptop backups or other configurations for systems that go to sleep. It's super convenient. Once it's installed, it stores its configuration in a different file. There's not a user equivalent, so I can't use crontab to schedule user tasks. But for system tasks, if you go into /etc, you should be able to find /etc/anacron tab. So we had cron tab for cron, and we have anacron tab for this one. So if I poke around in here somewhere, there it is, anacron tab right there. And if I edit that file, or just take a look at what's in it, so I will cat anacron tab, then right here, I can see tasks that are scheduled to run in the event that they're skipped. And remember those folders, the cron.daily, cron.weekly, cron.monthly, where I didn't really care which day they ran on? Well, jobs have to be scheduled with a time. And so all of those folders were set to be executed at a particular time. But Anacron is calling them. So if we miss that particular time, it'll make it up, right? And it's basically setting a period and saying, as long as we come back up within 5 days, we'll rerun that daily command, or within 25 days, we'll rerun the weekly command, or longer for the monthly, 45 days for the monthly. So it will rerun those commands after the fact. So not only was Anacron already installed on my system, it's actually already configured to do stuff. And so it's set to make that up. It does implement a random delay. What you don't want is you don't want to boot your system and immediately get slammed by all these jobs running. So it sets up a delay where your system's allowed to fully boot and wait a little bit before it starts firing off the jobs to kind of reduce the impact. And it'll actually apply a random delay to each job individually, so they don't all run right in a row immediately, so it staggers them a little bit. it's assuming that you're already not too concerned about exactly when these things run. So it gives a little flexibility to preserve performance. But this helps to ensure that they run. Anacron's super easy to install, and then you just have to remember /etc/anacron tab instead of /etc/cron tab.
Can we restrict access to cron like we do with that?
Yeah, you know, so
we need to.
in this case, well, Anacron is kind of already restricted because you have to be an administrator to mess with the Anacron table. Regular users can't do it. But with cron, we saw where regular users can. They can create their own cron jobs. You might not want that. Maybe you want cron to be like Anacron, where only an admin can schedule stuff. And that's fine. It's easy to do. If you remember with the @ command, I showed you guys the @.allow and @.deny files. Cron can do the same thing. In fact, let's see if I have them. So if we take a look at my /etc folder, we can see if I've got cron.allow or cron.deny. I see a cron.deny right there. I do not see a cron.allow. So I've got cron.deny. And if I take a look at that one, it's empty. All right. Well, it behaves just like the @ command. If I don't have a cron.allow and cron.deny, if they're both missing, then by default, only administrators can use cron. End users might be able to run cron tab and create a table, but it won't execute. It won't actually put them in var spool. It won't run them. All right. Usually they'll just get an error. So it locks it down to just admins. If there's a cron.allow file, then you just list usernames in there. And if the user's in the list, they're allowed to use cron. If they're not in the list, they're blocked. Everybody else is blocked. Cron.deny is the opposite. If you make a list inside of cron.deny, those are the users that are not allowed to do it. And then everybody who's not on the list is allowed. It allows it by default. Okay. Now I'm in CentOS. Let me flip to a Ubuntu machine real quick. So this one's Ubuntu, and I'm going to get into /etc. Since I keep showing you empty files, which are not exciting. So let me find, this one has, you know what? There's no cron.allow or cron.deny here either. So I'm not finding a whole lot. Let's see if this @deny has anything. We'll take a look in there. And whoops, got a sudo. And you got to spell it right. This is my typing challenge of the day. Hey, there we go. So see how this one's structured? It's just a list of usernames. And if you look, these are all service names. It's saying, I don't want the alias command or the guest command, the nobody. You know, these are different service processes, and I don't want them to be able to schedule jobs. And so they're being blocked right here. And so this is how you would structure those files, just a list of usernames. And that's what's read, and it's processed every time the command is accessed. So anytime somebody tries to run those, it's going to double check and just make sure whether or not they're allowed to do it. So that's the structure of those files. They're pretty straightforward. Just remember, if you delete them, the default is just admins will be able to run it.
Awesome. Helping you work smarter, not harder. It's Scheduling Tasks Part 2. And before we conclude this episode, Don, anything else you'd like to say?
You know, I was just shuffling my notes real quick to see. I think I got through everything on these. Just know, if you use Linux on your desktop, you're probably not really messing around with @ and cron very much. You know, that is not really designed for workstations. But in the server world, you need to have a good understanding of cron. You will use it a lot. There are many scheduled tasks that you'll want to execute, and this is the kind of the de facto standard for how we do that.
Thank you, Don. CompTIA Linux Plus, awesome series. Make sure you watch each and every episode, which by now it's about, how many do you think? About 35, 40?
I don't think we're that high.
No, we're getting there.
Yeah.
But it's
a lot of
important.
content.
It's important information you need now and in the future. It's going to help you when that exam comes rolling around, and that is inevitable. So make sure you pay attention and take advantage of the supplementary information in the course library. It is there to do one thing, help you be even more successful. So check that out too. And tell everybody you know about IT Pro TV. IT Pro TV is binge-worthy. Thanks for watching. I'm Zach Memis.
And I'm Don Pizzette.
We'll see you again very soon.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.